Hey YouTube, Untamed here. So today I'm going to talk through a topic that a lot of you have actually asked me to speak to throughout the years. I just have never really taken the time to kind of jot down some notes and really highlight the good takeaways that I've learned throughout the years, and that is, how do you transport a vehicle? So in this video today, I'm really going to walk through what are the different types of transportation options that are available. I'm going to talk through the different means of arranging that transportation, and I'll also wrap up with how much you should expect to pay to transport your vehicle. I'll kind of give you a loose idea of what you should expect so you know you're not getting the wool pulled over your eyes for it. So throughout this, I'll really kind of highlight my experiences as I've transported a lot of vehicles over the last few years. So I have a pretty good idea of what the process looks like and what things to avoid and what not to do ultimately. So I've learned through my own personal mistakes, and I'll share that with you in this video. So first and foremost, what are the different types of transportation? You have open carrier trailers or you have enclosed trailers. I won't beat this to death, but pretty straightforward. The open carriers are like what you see, oftentimes a double-decker open trailer with multiple vehicles stacked on it. You get that as an option. Obviously, your vehicle's exposed to the elements, exposed to roadway debris as you're driving past vehicles, more rock chips, more vulnerable to rock chips, stuff like that. But you're paying a lot less than the alternative, which is enclosed trailer. Enclosed trailer often costs quite a bit more, but you do get that greater peace of mind, of course, of having your vehicle show up without any additional rock chips, dents, or whatever cracks in the windshield. So you kind of you get that additional peace of mind. However, it is important to note that, transportation companies, they are required to carry insurance. So if there is a new chip, crack, dent, ding, or whatever on your vehicle that you can prove was not there upon pickup, and I'll talk through how you can prove it later on, but if you can prove that it wasn't there upon pickup, they're required to pay for the repair. So pretty straightforward there. Oftentimes that could be a headache though, if you have to open that can of worms with the transport company. So next up is the different means of arranging transportation. And this is the most important part perhaps, because I think a lot of people, when they buy a vehicle from out of state, they're arranging to purchase a vehicle from out of state. What do? They Google, how do I transport my vehicle, or transport services from Florida to Wyoming. They'll just kind of put in that in Google, and kind of whatever the first couple things that pop up, they start looking into that. And that's probably the most common approach. When you do that, oftentimes you're going to see the nationwide companies, transport companies, that pop up first, right? So you see companies like Montway, Roadrunner, Shipley, Nexus is one, and there's a couple others out there. But Montway and Roadrunner tend to be the largest of the group, right? So what do they look like? This is important because I made a pretty grave mistake the first time I transported a vehicle. When you arrange transport with one of those large companies, this is what it looks like. So you are saying, hey, I'm trying to transport a Toyota Tundra TRD Pro from Florida, Miami, Florida to Cheyenne, Wyoming, right? You give the two different zip codes, you give them the vehicle, you often plug it in on their website, and then they kind of spit out an estimate for you. They spit out an estimate number of what you should expect to pay. Oftentimes, it kind of feels kind of high. What I recommend doing is you call them. You call them up and say, hey, I'm looking to make this transport, to have this take place. What are you seeing within the system? Can we make it a little bit less than what your estimate is? So that estimate that they spit out is based on recent transactions that have taken place on very similar transport services, right? So they're kind of basing that estimate off of the last few vehicles of similar sort, like your Tundra, that have made that trek. Oftentimes there's a per mile charge, right? So that per mile charge is affected by a number of factors, affected by fuel cost. It's affected by the time of year. If you're trying to move a vehicle, in the middle of winter, that's going to be affected in the price to some degree, that per mile cost, right? So you call them up and say, hey, if you're not in a big rush, I recommend, if you end up going through one of these nationwide companies, I recommend saying, hey, I'm looking to pay $1,400. Pretend the estimate was $1,600. Say, can we try to make $1,400 happen? They are not the transport company. They're not the ones actually with the drivers moving your vehicle. What they are is essentially a contract medium. So they're the ones who post your job onto this giant board that all transport companies in the United States can see. They have access to it, right? So they can see all these different job offerings through Montway. They have access to put your job onto this board. And these companies, private companies, often kind of one-off companies, random companies here and there, they can accept your job. So it's like a bidding thing, right? So many people can see your job posted on the board. You're like, okay, I'm actually going to be moving a few vehicles anyway from Florida to Chicago. I can make a Florida to Wyoming job happen. And they can accept your job within the system. So that's what you're doing when you go through Montway or Roadrunner or one of those companies, right? They're just kicking your job onto the board. And then you sit and wait. You wait to see who's going to accept your job. Montway or Roadrunner will give you that higher estimate at the beginning, because if you're trying to move your vehicle fast, if you're trying to get it the next day or two, you're going to have to pay more, right? Because if you're going to be patient with it, you can probably, find a company willing to do it for less. But keep in mind, lesson that I learned the hard way is you often get what you pay for. So those companies that are taking those really cheap jobs, they tend to be a little lackluster and maybe not the most noble companies, and companies with the best integrity. I'll leave it at that, as I've learned, unfortunately. So sometimes it is to kind of live by, you get what you pay for to some degree. So that's what it looks like when you go through a nationwide company like Montway Roadrunner. They're putting on a board. Companies can then bid and accept your job. But you got to be patient and just kind of wait, especially if you're trying to pay less for it. What I did, my mistake that I made on my very first vehicle purchase from out of state, I had a vehicle, I purchased it in Oregon, and I had it transported across the nation to me. When I did that, I did not make it clear to the company that I used. I think it was Roadrunner at that time. Might have been, I think it was Roadrunner. I did not make it clear that I wanted them to be the focal point. So they will charge you anywhere from 50 to, I think it's 100 to 150 is what you can expect that company to charge you. So that's like their service fee for throwing your job offering on the board. You can negotiate that fee a little bit, especially if you're military, law enforcement. You can kind of negotiate that fee part of it. But they're going to throw it on the board, but they should be the ones receiving the phone calls from the transport companies. And I didn't elect for that my first time. So the first time I transported a vehicle, I had literally over the course of a few days, hundreds of people, hundreds of different car transport companies calling me directly. They were calling my cell phone directly saying, hey, I'm heading out that direction. I can maybe make your job happen. Are you willing to do? They'll like negotiate a figure with me, but the company's working with me directly. Some may like that, but if you end up going that route, just know that your phone will likely get blown up with 100 phone calls. So that was a huge mistake I made. The next time I used Montway or Roadrunner, I ended up electing for them, the company, Montway or Roadrunner, to be the middleman, to be the ones receiving the phone calls or receiving the bid offers for the job that we had posted. Meaning, so when I said, hey, I want to pay $1,400 to get my Tundra from Florida to Wyoming, instead of the companies calling me directly, they'd called Montway, contacted them and said, hey, I'm willing to accept that job if he's willing to take do it for $1,500. They can kind of negotiate the price a little bit, and then Montway will then contact you, me in that case, and say, hey, we have someone willing to take your job. They can get it there by next Thursday if you're willing to do $1,500. They'll kind of negotiate with you a little bit and kind of talk through it. You can say, no thanks, we'll keep it up on the board, or accept and get it out there. So it's all a matter of how fast you want to get your vehicle at the end of the day. You got to pay oftentimes a little bit more if you want to get it when you want to get it, which is pretty clear, I get. So means of transport. So that is the one, nationwide. Sorry, I kind of beat it to death, but that's an important one. I think a lot of people more often than not will go that route. Just make sure that you lean on the company to be the middleman and to not share your personal contact on the board with all the private companies calling you, because it's going to turn into a headache, I assure you. So the other option is, and this is what I recommend doing after all my experiences of moving at least a dozen or more vehicles at this point across the nation, this is what I recommend doing. I recommend Googling, so pretend I bought it in Miami, Florida. Pretend that's where I was getting the Tundra. I would Google then auto transport companies near Miami, Florida. That's what I'd Google. I'd Google auto transport companies near the city of which you're purchasing your vehicle, the origins of where your vehicle is coming from. And then you contact them directly. So they're based out of the city. You know that. They're based out of the city that you are buying your vehicle. So you already kind of have a little bit of an advantage, right? Because there's not some random company who happens to be going through Florida to pick up your vehicle. It's someone who's already there, and you know that's their base, their home base. And there's benefit to that, especially when it comes to the pricing, right? So you say, hey, I'm buying a vehicle, I'm buying that Tundra. Do you have any drivers coming up this direction toward Wyoming, right? I would ask them that, and oftentimes they will. They'll have multiple drivers coming up through this region, right? Or through I-90, I-80, whatever. And then you can negotiate directly with the source. The benefit of doing that is, even if you end up paying a little bit more, the benefit is you're working with the driver. You're working with a driver who you know is coming out of Miami. They're familiar with the area. And Miami's my example here, of course, but they're familiar with the area. And oftentimes, in my experience anyway, they have been less. Each of mine have been less when I've done this. And they often appreciate it when it's right in their backyard, their pickup. So that factors into the price ultimately. So you're arranging it and you get definitive dates. So when you call them, you say, hey, how much would you charge and how soon can you get it? You can hang up the phone knowing exactly when their next opportunity to deliver to you is, and know exactly how much they're going to want to charge you for it. And you get rid of that middleman fee of Montway and Roadrunner, which is $100, $150 typically. It varies a little bit. You get rid of that fee entirely. So even if the transport's $100 more, you're still technically maybe saving a little bit compared to going through Montway and crossing your fingers and holding your breath through that platform, if that makes sense. So that's what I recommend doing. If you're buying a vehicle from Dallas, Texas, Google auto transport companies in Dallas, Texas, and then contact them directly and then see if they're willing to take your job and when they could do it. And that is always the best avenue. I already talked to that original mistake of not letting the nationwide company know that I want them to be the middleman instead of, you're paying them no matter what, the fee, the charge, so might as well have them be that middleman if you end up going that direction. And now I'm going to wrap up with perhaps the most important lesson that I learned, and that is document, document, document. So if you're buying the vehicle from a dealership, ask that your sales rep out at that dealership takes a very well-documented video of your vehicle that you're buying right before or even as is being picked up by the transport company. The transport company legally is required to take photos of your vehicle upon pickup so they can prove or disprove any damage that was done or didn't take place during transit. They're required to do that, but oftentimes they're pretty lazy with it, I've learned. They just kind of take photos around and still they'll argue until they're blue in the face to try to avoid paying you out. I assure you, I've experienced it and it's a bummer. So ask that your sales rep 9 times out of 10, I'm sure they'll be more than happy to do that. They just sold you a vehicle. Ask that they do a very detailed walk around video as they're picking it up. So you have that hip pocket in case any damage is on it upon arrival. You can easily dispute it or easily claim that without any dispute from the company. So document the crap out of it. And upon its arrival, as it's coming off the truck, as it's arriving, I recommend bringing out your phone, even though you might feel weird doing it, but record it. Record the entire thing. And this saved my rear with my 1997 Land Cruiser that I had, my collector's edition. It saved my rear when it came to actually getting their insurance to pay out a little bit. It was indisputable. They couldn't, right? So document the entire delivery. And to some, this may sound like a no-brainer, but definitely do it because it doesn't feel natural when someone's like unloading your vehicle to have your phone out recording it. But it also sends a signal to them that you mean business, you're very serious about this, and you're not just going to let them take advantage of you if there is any damage. So definitely recommend over-documenting the entire delivery process and really focus and take a lot of photos because you might need them, unfortunately. So over-document. And the final thing I'll throw out, sorry, I said final already, but if you do have an opportunity to see the vehicle in person, especially if it's a used vehicle, try to fly out and see it. Try to get eyes on the vehicle, feel the vehicle, make sure it's good, right? Because the last thing you want to do is buy a vehicle out of state, have it show up to your doorstep and be a surprise, a negative surprise. So if you have an opportunity, if you could take a few days off work, I always found enjoyment out of buying a one-way ticket to somewhere, taking an Uber from the airport to the dealership. Oftentimes the dealership will send a rep to come pick you up because you're buying a vehicle from them. They're often nice. And then drive it home. Turn it into a little mini adventure. And that way, just in case there is a big surprise upon your arrival, you can dip. You haven't signed anything in person yet. You haven't actually taken possession of the vehicle. And when you buy a vehicle from out of state and have it transported, you need to have it paid for before the dealership releases it to a transport company. So you're not putting yourself in a sticky situation if you fly out there first before you sign. So again, another no-brainer perhaps, but I myself have made that mistake. And I don't want anybody else to do it too. So there you have it, guys. Hopefully some of you have found some value in this. Let me know in the comment section. This is my best recommendation of how to transport a vehicle if you're buying from out of state. Hope you found some value in this. Thanks for watching as always. Until next time.